Hi friends, Andrew Carruthers here, Education Director for Sam Villa. Today on the Artist Studio we have a bob to show you, but we're going to twist it up a little bit with an undercut. A lot of times our guests come in and they want these really solid, really precise looking bobs, but they have a lot of hair, especially in the back of the head. And they don't want layers, they don't want a lot of texturizing, so what do? You undercut it. By undercutting the underneath, we take that weight and bulk that can happen around the nape area and we move that away from the nape and we actually push it up into the occipital, which does two things. It allows this to swing and have more balance to it, and it allows it to collapse more at the neckline, but it also creates just a little bit of fullness through the occipital area, which is really never a bad thing. A little extra fullness right there creates that scoop that so many ladies are looking for in their bobs. So what we're gonna walk you through is how to create this shape, and it's actually a lot simpler than you might think. We'll start out with the sectioning and how you create that undercut. Then we'll get into the top and some of the things that make cutting these more solid bobs really successful. So, hope you have a mannequin head, or maybe your best friend that's willing to get a bob. Let's get started. All right, to get us started, we gave our beautiful model a shampoo and a conditioning head massage. Not really, but then we added some of the Redken 1 United. This is gonna be a great cutting lotion for us. Also gonna help to soften up the mannequin hair without making anything feel oily. Next thing is the first sectioning, and I went ahead and did that. So the sectioning is about mid-occipital, and then it goes to the top of the ear. Now, what's really important, not so much the mid-occipital, that's just kind of where the section's ending up on her head shape, but from the top of the ear, we want a horizontal line straight back. So just make sure that you're dividing from the top of the ear horizontally, top of the ear to top of the ear. So what this is doing is it's giving us an area to detach under here that everything above it is a much more even balanced shape now, because we're taking out that extra length down here that tends to create that puffiness in the back. So it's going to give us a much more balanced bob shape front to back. Next section we'll take is a vertical section down the center. And I'm going to give you a side view on this because really what's most essential with this is the elevation. We want to be at 90 degrees to the head shape. Now, a lot of times we're taught 45 degrees of elevation for graduation, which is great. The only challenge is a 45-degree elevation and that type of finger angle. That's going to give me a very heavy feeling graduation. And the whole idea is to help to kind of collapse this shape into the neck. And that low and heavy of a graduation might not give me that shape. So we're going to go 90 instead and just use a slight diagonal finger angle, which is going to keep that graduation much more lean. So I take my fingers straight to the head and I come out and I create just a slight diagonal finger angle. So lengthwise, I just want to make sure that with the hair texture I'm dealing with, if I go too short on super thick heavy hair, without going ridiculously short, of course, it could actually make the hair push out. With finer hair, I want to go short enough that I can still have some structure in there. So a lot of it is about what is the hair underneath going to do to the hair on top, because you're not really going to see this hair underneath. So the lengths aren't really dependent on a visual process, or sorry, it's not going to depend on what we visually want underneath. It's really going to matter more what we visually want on top. So come in 90 degrees, diagonal finger angle. I'm using this 6-inch swivel because of this. Watch. What? Look at that. My wrist is still in a natural position. A lot of times when we're cutting these graduations in vertical sections, we see people's wrist do this. That is not good on your wrist, guys. So just think of your longevity behind the chair and choose positive tools and positive angles that are going to support you. So watch, it just rotates, rotates, rotates. And that gets me into that graduated cutting position without putting stress on my body. I'm in a little bit of a weird body position just because I need to keep my body out of your view. But normally what I would do is put my body right in front of my section so that it's pretty much down my center. But I'm standing off to the side just a little bit so that you guys can see 90 degrees elevation, diagonal finger angle, and cut the line with that 6-inch swivel shear. This is in our signature series, so you have the Japanese molybdenum, lots of good ergonomic benefits because of the forward set thumb. This is a great shear for this type of work. Definitely one of my favorites. All right, so as you can see, that builds that short along a nice graduation for us. So it'll give us a little bit of support to this upper side, which will keep a little bit of fullness to the hair, but it's going to collapse, especially down at the bottom where we want the tuck most. So our next section again is going to be a vertical section, taking about a 1/2 inch of new hair, and we'll take about a 1/2 inch of that previously cut section and we'll push that out of the way. We're gonna marry those two together. Now, you could over direct back if you wanted to, if you felt like you needed to leave yourself some weight behind the ear. That's definitely not necessary with this particular hair texture. So we are going to use what we call natural over direction. So what that means is that we're following the natural head shape. So when we think about over direction, we usually think about over directing forward or back, which causes length forward or back. In this particular case, what we want to do is we want to take our guide section and we want to take our new piece of hair and we want them to meet in the center of the section. Because if my guide stays here and my new piece of hair goes to it, I'm going to build length moving forward. I don't want that. I want it to follow the head shape. All right, so take your next section there, next 1-inch section, marry the guide and the new piece of hair together over the center of your section. Remember, your elevation is at 90 degrees. Your fingers go in and just come out to the exact same angle that your guide is showing you. Nice thing is now that the guide's in there, you should just be able to trust that guide and not get too hung up on your finger angle necessarily. So now you can just really trust your elevation, that natural over direction, and then have your fingers follow the guide from the previously cut section. Once you get down here to the neck, this can be challenging to get our fingers into the neckline. Let me get a clip in there to keep that that hair out of your view. There we go. So what you can do is as you take your hand in there, allow your fingers to actually come in and curve to the head shape. So you almost cup your hand. That way you can actually get to that hair. It's hard to get your fingers to mirror that angle too, but that's not as important because your angle's in there, you can see it. And the hair's short enough that it's sticking out a little bit, and so you don't have to get your fingers perfectly on that angle to be able to cut it. 1/2 inch of new hair. And I don't usually clip that out of the way, but it's going to be beneficial for your viewing pleasure. And we'll just take a 1/2 inch of previously cut hair as our guide. So we have a new 1-inch vertical section. Again, marry those two together. Natural over direction, meaning that both sides are coming to the same point. Elevate 90 degrees from the head shape. There's my guide from underneath, slide to it, mirror that with my finger angle, and then use my 6-inch swivel to cut that line. There's the guide. Again, cup that finger in there. And that's going to build my graduation. So at this point, it's the exact same thing, and even when I go to the opposite side, nothing is going to change. Because we're in vertical sections, I'm not all of a sudden going to change my body position to go into a fingers down position. It's just unnecessary. So just if we're in vertical sections, we can keep our fingers up the whole way through both sides. So I'm going to continue on. Just make sure that, especially right here, this is a transition area. We call it the horizontal transition. It's where the back starts to round, and all of a sudden right here, everything changes and it starts to head forward. It's a really strong corner right there. So when you get to that point, make sure that your body is stepping around the head with that change in direction. If your body stays behind the head, what is going to happen here is you're going to increase over direction. So the head shape's going away, so if my body stays back here, my natural tendency is going to be to do this and cut it towards the back of the head. This hair actually lives more on the side profile of the head, so I'm going to move my body to that side profile. So again, continue on with vertical sections, same elevation, same over direction. I'm just going to work to my left-hand side, and then you'll see me move to the right. Okay, so we've completed the underneath, and just remember to change your body position and maintain your elevation, your over direction, and your finger angle, and you're gonna be just fine. Nothing crazy about this. Now, we're gonna throw a little loop into this. We're actually gonna blow dry this first. And for some of you, you might go, well, won't the dry hair be shorter than if we cut the top wet? And the answer is, well, the thing is this isn't supposed to attach to this, so it doesn't matter. So why not blow dry this now when we already have everything above it clipped up and out of the way? It's going to be much more efficient, much easier to blow dry this and refine it. So we're actually going to grab the handle comb. This is our Artist Series handle comb. And we're going to use the comb to blow dry this because the hair's so short, we're going to get a little bit more control with the teeth of the comb than we are with a brush that might sit out away from the head too much. We're going to have our guest go ahead and tilt her head down for us slightly. And I do have this higher than I probably would in the salon, but it's for you so that you can view it just fine. We're going to turn the blow dryer on high heat, medium airflow, and we're going to come through and we're just going to wrap dry. So the comb's going to come in and grab the hair and just create a back and forth X pattern as we come in right behind it with the blow dryer. Now, we don't want to get after this with super high heat and super high airflow, because what happens with shorter hair like this when we get really aggressive with the blow dry is it can actually make it feel really stick straight and really hard. So we're actually allowing the hair to dry a little bit slower so we can continue to move around and manipulate the hair into place. And it's going to dry pretty fast because we also added some of the Redken Pillow Proof Express Primer treatment. Treatment primer, I believe. And that helps the hair to dry faster as well. So again, we're just working that hair back and forth with that handle comb. The handle comb's got a lot of width to it, and the tooth spacing is very perfect. Also, if you needed to, down here at the bottom, if their hairline's really resistant, you can use that wide spine or backbone of the comb to even press into the head a bit as you dry, and that creates even a bit more tension down there at the bottom to smooth out the hair if necessary. And by moving the hair back and forth instead of just straight down, we're going to keep the blow dry feeling more natural and softer. We just keep going straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down. It's going to make the hair feel really, really broomsticky. And by having the guests tilt their head down just a little bit for us, it allows us to more comfortably get into this area below the nape or below the occipital. And they can sit in this head position for a few minutes without discomfort, most of them. They don't have any kind of neck problems, I guess. So we'll just continue to blow dry that down and back and forth until we have it nice and smooth. And don't get impatient because it takes a little while since you're going at it a little bit easier. If you're on a time crunch, of course, you can crank up the heat, crank up the airflow a little bit. But we're just going to continue nice and slow so that we keep that softness in the hair. Okay, then underneath is all polished up for us, and now we can get into that detailing phase. And usually our recommendation is to cut your basic shape, your foundational shape in with the client natural head position. That's just to make sure that you keep perception and perspective over the balance within your shape and within how she's actually going to wear it, which is with her head straight up. Now, when we're doing this detailing phase, we do have the option of going ahead and tilting the head forward because our basic shape's already in place, so we're okay to do that. We're gonna switch to the detailing comb. This is the Artist Series detailing comb just because it's much smaller and more delicate, and that's really how we're working now. We're also gonna use the Signature Series reversible blending shear to detail, and that's gonna keep the softness in the haircut. So one thing I always wanna keep in mind too is whichever way these teeth are facing, it could influence the hair to want to go that way. So for the most part, we want to be cutting with the teeth headed in towards the neck. First thing is, let's refine the perimeter. And again, we're using the blending shear to do that just to keep everything really, really soft. We could do this with point cutting as well, just with a regular shear, come in and point cut this off to keep it soft. But remember that this isn't needing too much detailing. It doesn't need to be really exceptionally perfect because for the most part, no one's gonna see this underneath. We cut this out specifically so that the hair could fall over it and have that weight taken out towards the perimeter area. Really collapse that weight towards the perimeter. Now, we have seen people that like this to be undercut in a way that they can show it off, you know, maybe wear it up in like a little bun when they go to the gym, something like that. So you may want to find that out in the consultation process if they're planning on showing this off, because that could dictate a little bit of how your detailing happens. The next thing that we want to address is any kind of weight imbalance. You can do some shear over comb work here if you feel like you still need to tuck this in a little bit. Sometimes our fingers just don't get us to a point down here at the bottom that it's quite as short as we want, so you can always come through afterwards and do some shear over comb work where you take that bottom neckline even a little bit shorter than you could cutting in your fingers. And then of course, with any type of graduation, we want to look at the weight line itself, because sometimes if our elevation was a little too low, maybe our finger angle was too steep for the technique, we could run into a place where the graduation feels too heavy, where that weight line just feels really bulky. And no one likes a bulky weight line. So if it does feel like it's a little bit weighty, you can come in and just kind of wiggle the solid blade of your blending shear in right at the weight line and just take a few little cuts out. The reversible blender is a little bit more of an aggressive blending shear. It takes quite a bit of hair out at one time, so it's not going to take much with that. If you feel like it's too much, you could always switch to the Invisablend, because the Invisablend is going to remove a lot less hair and allows you a little bit more freedom and safety room to cut more cuts with taking less hair away. So it's really just dependent on what kind of density you're looking to remove and what kind of visual effect you're trying to create. But you can see that was a lot easier because I didn't have all this other hair on top that I was contending with. So that's a nice first step. Anytime you're doing an undercut type of a technique, you can go in and do your detailing and texturizing underneath before you bring the top over in a way that's going to block you from getting to the underneath. So now let's go to the top. We'll bring her back into natural head position, and let's remove our clips. Depending on hair density, this next section could be smaller or larger. So we're going to find the vertical transition of the head. So we're going to take the comb, we're going to place it vertically, we're going to take 3 fingers, place it on the comb, take the pointer finger, the opposite hand, and just pinch it between the head and the comb. Where the comb, or sorry, where the pointer finger is pointing is where that transition happens from where the head's more vertical to starting to transition to the top of the head. And we're going to start our parting there. We're going to bring that forward. As we bring it forward, it's going to get a little bit higher potentially because of that natural shape of the crown. The vertical transition in the back's usually slightly lower than the side. And again, you just check that through the side by taking the comb in a vertical position, holding with 3 fingers, take the pointer finger of the opposite hand, pinch it between the comb and the head, and you can see my pointer finger has gone right to it now. And after a while, you tend to see those shapes starting to appear for you. So those are little tools that you can use until your mind's eye just starts to see that shape naturally. So what we're doing is we're parting off the difference between the sides and back of the head and the top of the head. And the reason for that is in everything above this line, it is affected much more by the natural head shape because it has to ride along the surface of the head before it falls down into the gravity. Everything below this line is going to fall a little bit more directly down into gravity. So as far as how we're holding the hair, it's not going to be as dictated by changes in head shape, top to bottom, and it's not going to be as challenged by natural growth patterns below this line. Most of those natural growth patterns that tend to affect the shape live more above this line in the crown and on the top of the head, like the natural part. I'm just going to clean that up a tiny bit. Okay, so now we also want to find our horizontal transition, which is the transition from the back to the side. And we do that Honestly, again, it's easiest to find just by your eye. You're gonna see that there's a really strong transition there. If you're not seeing that yet, you can take 2 horizontal planes, one across the back and one across the side. And basically what you're trying to do is create almost like a shoebox on the head, and you'll see that there's a corner there. That is about where that's going to live, and we're just going to take a vertical parting right there. We're gonna push that forward, and we'll repeat that on the opposite side. And again, once you start to look at these transitions on the head, your eyes are gonna go right to these things. You're not gonna need these little tricks to try and find them. But for now, use your tools. So now, we have all of the hair on the back of the head. If I want this perimeter to go shorter in the back to longer in the front, or vice versa, then I will start for sure with a center parting. If not, it's not really necessary to go from a center parting because we can work across the back. Now, you're gonna hear tons of different rules from tons of different people on how you hold for a bob. You can press it into the head, you can hold it in your fingers, you can hold it in your comb. It all really depends on how much you feel like you need control, and also if you want that slight natural undercut that pressing into the scalp gives you. There's lots of different options, and in fact we did a whole YouTube video just on those 3 things. So what we recommend is keeping the hair at its natural fall, so not necessarily pressing it into the skin, mainly because after you release it from the skin, it's gonna change the shape. So you can either do that by holding in your comb, and that's an easy way to keep very close to the natural fall or 0 degrees of elevation. Or if you put it in your fingers, especially since we're higher up on the head, you are able to get it pretty much to go straight down into natural fall. The one thing that we would say to be cautious of if you're cutting in fingers is your tension. If we're pulling super, super tight on tension, especially as the head starts to round up, it tends to bounce up after we release it. So if you're going to use your fingers, just be very, very gentle with your tension. Now, if you want a really crisp, hard line, you can blunt cut this. If you'd like something softer, you can very much point cut it. When we bring this down, we do want it to at least be a finger length past the length of the detachment. If it's not, when it dries, you will see the bottom of your detachment under there. So make sure that you're at least 1 finger length below. Check that you're horizontal with the floor if you're going for just parallel with the floor. We're gonna use the big 6 3/4 inch Streamline series shear on this, and it's just because the strength of the blade is going to keep that from pushing. We're gonna change our body position slightly to go to this next area. I'm not, because I'm kind of just shifting around to stay out of your way so that you can see. And some schools of thought say that you should cut with the points of your shears headed one direction on one side, and then if you go in this way on this side, then you should reverse and cut backhand going to the opposite side. That's a total option. I found when I do it that my sides are uneven because I'm not as solid cutting with backhand. So for me, personally, it just makes more sense to stay cutting forehand the entire way around. I feel like I have more control and I just keep more balance in the shape. I'm just adjusting there a little bit just to make sure that we're nice and clean. Now, the reason we parted off here at the horizontal transition is because it's a huge change in the head shape like we talked in the underneath. So again, what happens here, a lot of times the head shape starts to change, but our body doesn't move. So we stay behind the guest. And what we end up doing is unintentionally taking this hair that lives more on the side of the head and doing this to cut it in the back of the head. If you don't want it to get longer moving forward, well, you just created over direction, which is also going to create length forward. You've also created a little bit of elevation, so you're going to lose that precise edge on your perimeter. So So make sure to move the body with the natural head shape. Take that big step as the head shape changes. Be extra careful with your tension on these sides because this is definitely where the hair likes to jump. And then cut that horizontal line. When you get to the top of the ear, even if you are cutting in hand, you have the option of coming through and just tucking the shears behind there and giving a little bit of tension release at that ear. What that's going to do is make sure that if they have a little bit of an extra full ear, that you're not going to have that bump in your perimeter line. One other thing to be cautious of too, if you're cutting in your fingers, one tendency that we see a lot in the classes that we teach in your salons is that we see that people want to take this and they want to flip it up towards them so that they can see that cutting line. That's going to create some graduation on your line. So the solution is to get low. Bend your knees, do some squats, get your quads working there. So that way you can look down here and you can keep the hair going straight down towards the floor rather than flipping it up towards you to see that cutting line. So I'm just going to step to the opposite side and complete the opposite side. All right, so after you complete both sides, give yourself a little cross check for balance. Not too shabby without a mirror, I must say. It's always one of the hard part about doing videos is I don't have a mirror in front of me, I have a camera. You guys don't help, you don't talk back and say, hey, that one side's a little longer than the other. Well, sometimes you do, but then it's in the comments and it's usually being rude, but just kidding. Okay, so now for the top. Here's what's really important is so many things happen in the top here. We've got the natural parting, and honestly, sometimes not even the natural parting, it's where they force their parting because they like it to have a really far side part, or maybe they like it to part on the opposite side versus the one that it naturally wants to part on. Lots of different reasons. So we want to part where they're going to actually wear it. And then as we come around to the crown is an area that a lot of things tend to jump around. And what'll end up happening very often is we like to take this up here at the top and comb it into place there. Now, if their hair doesn't live here, it actually lives there because of the swirl of the crown. We're going to end up cutting it here, and then when it goes over here, we're gonna have a short spot. So our recommendation is at first to just kind of give yourself that little bit of safety net to allow the swirl and the movement of the crown to go where it wants to go. You can always readjust after you blow dry based on if you're able to easily get that crown to cooperate with you. But part of it too is if they are going to be able to get the crown to cooperate with them. All right, so just dampen down the hair with that continuous mist bottle. We're gonna pick up our 6 3/4 inch Streamline Series shear once again. And that does come in a 6 1/4 and a 5 1/2 inch length too, if you like a slightly smaller shear. The Streamline we came out with really because we wanted something to fit closer to the hand. The actual finger holes themselves are a reduced size, but you still have the ergonomic benefit of the forward set thumb. They also have some really slick little cutouts, so you can hold the shear in multiple positions and without compromising your wrist. So the Streamline series is really good for those of you that feel like maybe our signature series, the finger holes are almost too large for you, and you like something that's a little lighter weight, a little more streamlined. Okay, so once we have that into its true natural fall, which is taking into account all the natural movement, all of the growth patterns on top, we only want to comb from the vertical transition down, because if I come back up here, I'm probably gonna pull something into an area that it doesn't naturally live. So once it's in that place, then we are going to go ahead and cut. We're still going to start in that center back, even though we're not necessarily parting things, just for consistency and ease. And we're cutting to our previously cut section as our guide. Be cautious here and make sure that you're just cutting right to the bottom edge of the previously cut guide and not cutting into it, because that's something that we do see happen sometimes, is that people want to be so precise that they accidentally cut back into the previously cut section rather than just cutting on top of it. So you notice I'm only bringing my comb up to where that vertical transition starts and combing down. Again, be cautious of your tension here, because if we pull too tightly, the hair's going to want to have that spring back effect. And if it does, we might have a little bit of a short spot sitting on top there. Right here where we get to the area where the recession starts to move forward, we want to be a little cautious, because if this starts to fall over top of her eye, she's not going to wear it there. She's going to push it back away from her eyeball. So we want to cut it there as well. One way that works really well is to just place your finger right at the corner of the eye, place the comb in, and just hold with the comb there. So that's going to give us that little bit of gap there. Then we come and we cut that away. So that way it leaves it strong when she pushes it back. You're going to see that a lot more significantly on the other side because it's the low side of the part. So we continue to move around the head shape and just cut to the previously cut section. These mannequins, it's a Pivot Point Erica mannequin. They're about medium density in relationship to most of our clientele. So this is probably fairly realistic as far as density is concerned with a good portion of your clientele. All right, so again here we want to be careful because that's where the recession area begins. So everything behind that recession area will just continue on in the same fashion. And then right here, this is where we want to get careful. So what we want to do is we want to comb this over to the corner of the eye. And this is if she's going to wear it without a fringe. Of course, if she's going to wear a fringe, this doesn't matter because it's all going to be cut in the fringe. So I'm going to take my pointer finger and just rest it there. Put the comb in my left hand if I'm a right-handed cutter. And then you can see underneath my arm, bring that comb down, bring it down, bring it down, and just stop right there. Carefully let go with my finger and then come through and cut. So what's going to trip you out a little bit if you've never done this like this before is when you release the hair, it is going to look like, oh wait, I made a mistake, it's longer now. But you have to remember that she is not going to wear her hair in front of her eyes. She's going to wear it over here, and that's where we want it to be strong. We'll probably have to refine that just slightly after we do the blow dry. So let's set you up on the blow dry here. We're going to just pick up the Signature Series paddle brush. This is our really simple paddle brush with a beautiful cushion on it, mainly because we want to keep this a really basic blow dry too. We're going to use our Ionic Pro Light dryer, and we're going to work just a wrap technique. So we're going to set up the hair in a diagonal motion, and then the brush is going to come in parallel with the grain of the hair, open so that the bristles come away from the head, and then watch as the bristles come back down to the head, see how they created a section, and then they come back up, bristles catch, bring it down to the head, and it's actually sectioning the hair as you blow dry. The nozzle of the blow dryer is going to come in right behind the brush and just flow right behind the brush, really close behind. This is just a really simple wrap dry technique, and then we're going to come back the opposite way. The hair's on a diagonal going this way, so the handle of the brush goes parallel with the grain of the hair. Open, grab with the teeth of the brush or the bristles of the brush, and then close it and keep the brush in contact with the head as you're drying. We want to keep the brush pressed into the head because that's what's going to create the tension and the polish. So watch as I take those sections down. We're going to show you just a few sections as I blow dry through this. It's a pretty simple technique. So we're just going to give you the basic idea as I work through this, and then we'll get into the refinement of the haircut. So you can see by taking your time and being very organized with your wrap dry, you can get a quite polished finish, especially from the base into the mid strands. Really the only thing that continues to need polished is just these very tips, just the very ends. So let's do a little bit of flat iron technique. We're gonna take a little bit of the Shine Flash 02 and just lightly spray that through the hair. And that'll act as a bit of a buffer and also put a nice gloss on the hair as we iron. You could use something a little bit stronger, a heat protectant with a little bit of hold. You could use Iron Shape 11 from Redken. That might leave it just feeling a little too held in place, and we want this bob to swing a little bit more. So we're gonna start in the center back. We're gonna take just a center vertical section, and we'll place a clip in very, very gently to hold the right side out of the way. And then we're going to take diagonal sections. Diagonal sections when you're flat ironing keeps things much, much softer and much rounder feeling. When we go in horizontal sections, it tends to set those in sheets and it just looks harder. So we're taking diagonal sections, we're gonna lead with the fine teeth of the hair, and watch the iron comes in at the mid strand and then starts to come down, and then it starts to close as we hit the very tips of the hair. We do one slow pass with a bit of a C-shaped arc through the mid strand and straight through the ends. That's gonna give us something that has a really nice polish to it, but also feels soft. A lot of times we just get way too much of a broomstick rigid feel with our flat irons. So again, the fine teeth come in, watch, the iron goes in just at the mid strand and it starts to move before you close and then close as you hit the ends. That's gonna prevent the crease, slowly through the ends, and that's gonna keep a nice polish. The iron is on color treated setting, which is our medium setting on the iron. The reason it's on that setting is that there is color on this head. It was pre-glossed with some Redken Shades of Q. And so we want to preserve that color. The iron will not go over 392 degrees on this setting. So that's gonna protect the color that's in the hair. We found out that once you go above that temperature, you can really start to affect the integrity of synthetic color. So just be cautious with that when you're working with your irons at home. So as you can see, those diagonal sections keep a nice soft rounded shape. So I'm gonna continue now. I'm just gonna keep working on both sides in the exact same fashion, taking diagonal sections. Don't go way up here because you don't need it and you could put a crease. Come here to the mid strand, start to close as you move, and then just very, very gentle through the ends. You only want to put super high tension on this if they have extremely resistant hair textures. Anything else, keep your touch light on the hair. That was the wide teeth, but that's okay. We'll come back in and just do a quick touch with the fine teeth. That's just to make sure that nothing goes into the iron in a tangle. So that's why we lead with the fine teeth. So I'm going to continue, finish up this side, and then head on to the right side. All right, so hopefully if you're working along at home or at your salon, you're with me so far. You've got your mannequin all blow dried super nice. The ends are ironed really well. Now we can go into the refinement stage. One thing I want to point out to you so that you don't freak out, because some of you might even be seeing this in the video. You're looking at this side going, what did I do wrong? It's too long. Well, remember that this is our heavy side, and everything from this point doesn't exist on that side. And she's not going to wear it like this. It needs to look balanced and even where she's going to wear it, and that's where you want to judge whether you're even or not. If you're not feeling even there, that's when you can start to refine this perimeter, and the perimeter is the first thing we're going to look at. So let's say this is hanging a little bit longer. You want to come in and just clean that up so that it's in balance side to side when she wears it off to the side. And I've always kind of liked this about these heavy bobs. I sort of like that little scoop forward that gives it a sense of tilt. That's totally personal taste, and that's up to you and your salon guest whether you like that or you want to try and do something else to balance it out. As we move around, really what we want to look for is just any imbalance in the perimeter here. Comb that through. Maybe point cutting just to keep things soft. Sometimes what happens is if you get in here and you get those big shears in there and you go to clean off a line, you end up putting another line in somewhere else. So sometimes point cutting is a nice solution as you're refining these perimeters. I did switch to our 7-inch dry cutting shear, the Signature Series 7-inch dry cutting shear, just because the blades are meant to handle the hardness of the dry hair. So it's not gonna push the hair like some other shears will. Now here's a really cool spot. Remember, in the back, initially we allowed this crown to do this because that's what it was telling us was gonna happen. So we cut it there first. As it was blow dried and flat wrapped, we were able to take that crown movement, that cowlick out a little bit, but look what it did, it left us a little overhang. That's exactly why we do this, is because now I have the opportunity to refine that. But if something else would have happened, if I would have forced it into this spot, cut it there, and the crown would have became really aggressive and pushed this over here, now I would have had a short spot in the haircut. So you can see by starting with it in the cowlick position, it creates this safety net for you so that you do have something in the refinement process. So now it wants to hang there. So now we can just refine it in that spot. And again, if you're feeling confident, you can come in and straight cut. If not, maybe coming in and point cutting that to keep it soft might be a good solution. Just balance that perimeter out really nice. And again, around the opposite side. And I'm pretty happy. So, if you look at the balance on this. A lot of times what happens is as we come from the side, that profile, and as we get to the back starts to look heavy and bulky. And that's usually because of all that neckline area hair. And a lot of times that's the stuff we're trying to texturize back out of the haircut. It's also the stuff that we're trying to tilt the head forward and cut out from underneath. So when they tilt their head forward or move their head, that's not popping out. So that undercut really solves a lot of challenges. It also makes it incredibly easy for her to blow dry this into position because that neckline hair, that thick, heavy, coarse hair that also has growth patterns in it, that can be the most challenging part for your guest to blow dry. So that undercut really solves a lot of issues. Now, if you feel like you need just ever so slightly a touch more bevel at the ends, we're gonna grab the Invisablend shear. This is the Signature Series Invisablend. This is the one that has the polished blade. You may have seen us use this before. Only the teeth do the cutting, so it allows the hair to slide forward as it's being cut. It creates little scalloped lines within the hair rather than blunt lines from the teeth. So this is great for this particular technique. If I want these ends to just tuck ever so slightly more, you can come in a vertical section, pick it up as if you were going to cut an actual graduation into the shape. So take that vertical section, I'm gonna hold it at low elevation, and look, diagonal finger angle. We're going to put the shear in as if we were gonna cut a graduation in, and we're gonna close and then slide out. What that does is it actually creates a texturized mini graduation within that heavier bobbed hair. Work in consistent sections, work around. And you want to cut about the same point on each area too so that it stays in balance. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but about the same area. I'm stopping maybe 1.5 inches from the ends. And do a little bit at a time. Remember, you can always do more with detailing, but once you've done too much, it's hard to step back. Then you got to get out the extensions. So just that tiny little cut there. And I probably don't need to do it around the front hairline just because there's so much less density there. It's usually still through here that we're gonna find that, because even the density of the hair changes. It's not just that there's more on the head there, it's also that a lot of times people's hair gets much finer as we get closer to the face. Changes into that other type of hair, which I don't remember that from my beauty school tests. So we'll just do 1 or 2 more of these. Vertical section, low elevation, stop about 1.5 inches from those ends, cut a diagonal line, diagonal cutting line, and that's just gonna tuck those ends in just the tiny bit more. You can see we're really texturizing with a purpose here. It's not just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna grab some sections and go after it with my blending shear. Now this piece of hair right here, this is one area that probably could use some weight because this tends to get really heavy and bulky right here. So we might go in more at a horizontal section. Grab one of the dry sectioning clips and hold that stuff above it out of the way. And then just come through at more of a diagonal with the teeth facing in. And you can see because the hair is resting against that polished blade after you close, the hair slides through the shear quite well. And then keep this stuff separated. Don't combine it into the hair underneath. You already texturized that, so don't re-texturize. And that'll just lighten that front up just a little bit for us. Let's hit it with the blow dryer one time just to release any extra hairs out of there. Grab our Shine Flash 02 one more time. Really focus that mainly in the ends. That'll bring out a little bit of texture in the ends. Introduce a beautiful shine without any oil. Make the studio smell really nice. Just get it all photo finish here. Beauty. See, I love that. I love that little piece on that side where it just tucks forward a little bit. I think it's pretty. So let's review. First step is to section from, ours ended up being mid-occipital, but most importantly, it's a horizontal line from the top of the ear to the top of the ear. Start with a 1-inch vertical section down the center, elevation is 90 degrees to the head shape, and then we're introducing that graduation through our finger angle, but just a slight diagonal there, not a real steep diagonal. We don't want to build too much weight. We're going to work in vertical sections, taking a small piece of new hair to the to the previously cut guide. We're not over directing back because we don't want to build weight forward, so we're using what we call natural over direction, where our guide and our new piece of hair meet in the center of the section. Then complete that underneath, blow dry it out before you do the top. Do all of your refinement underneath before you bring that top down. Part just to that vertical transition. Bring that down into natural fall, cut your perimeter line. Then be really cautious on the top of the head above the vertical transition to make sure that you get all of that hair into its true natural fall. Trust the cowlicks in the back and let them go where they want to go. And then just remember to over direct this to the corner of the eye before you cut so that you preserve that length on the front if she does want to wear it all the way over here on the eye.